Extraordinary claims do not require extraordinary evidence. What they require is the evidence that is personally sufficient for what you believe. There's this term that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that comes from nowhere. People believe it because it sounds good, and some guy who was famous on TV and could speak good said it, but that doesn't mean that that argument is actually any good. Carl Sagan, the guy who coined that term, is not some end-all be-all genius of history. He's smart, but he does not have the final say. If we take the same logic and apply it to atheism, you're going to get even more extraordinary claims without any extraordinary evidence. Take a look at life coming from non-life and everything coming from nothing. That is ridiculous. Show me any evidence for that. The evidence, in fact, points in the opposite direction, that there was a beginning to the universe. Okay, what about the multiverse? We have so much more evidence for there being a God and historical evidence for Christianity than we do any evidence for there being a multiverse. It's just a good theory. All right, what about some form of evolution? What started that process? Where did it come from an unconscious being to a conscious being? What made that switch? It's an extraordinary claim to say that a rock or a piece of physical matter one day decided it needed some form of consciousness without any outside help. That's an extraordinary claim. Now provide the extraordinary evidence for that. I'm not denying evolution, by the way. I'm just saying, how do you explain that without some kind of hand guiding the entire process? You know what we do have extraordinary evidence for? The creation of the universe, the fact that there was a beginning to it, the Big Bang. And you know who came up with that extraordinary evidence to support that? A Catholic priest. Albert Einstein didn't want to believe in the beginning because that would point to some kind of God. But guess what? The extraordinary evidence pointed him in the direction to believe that there was a beginning to the universe. Everything that has been created has a creator, and the universe looks like it was created or had a beginning. So what created that? And not to mention Jesus being one of the most historically attested to people in ancient history, although he was a poor Jewish man who was essentially homeless, created a movement big enough to spread to 4 separate continents within 100 years of his life, causing people to die for claiming that Jesus rose from the dead. There is extraordinary evidence that Jesus was a real person who existed, who was crucified under Pontius Pilate and was claimed to be seen risen from the dead and claimed to have committed miracles by even non-Christian historians. They say that people saw him rise from the dead and that he supposedly did miracles. But you do not need extraordinary evidence for extraordinary claims. You just need sufficient evidence for extraordinary claims, because they're all just claims. Something only becomes extraordinary when you personally, subjectively believe it to be extraordinary. So go love your neighbor, love God, repent, believe in the good news because it's good, and God bless.